I've not seen Magnus get this outplayed in a very long time. He was playing with the black pieces this game. He selects a La Francais variation, whispers on guard as he plays it. His opponent, the man with the power right now, is Nan's He-Man, and this was a titillating Tuesday game. Online chess, the most elite Grand Mariners in the world playing it out to see who's the best online blitz player that week. Let's dive in on this incredible game. Hans Niemann plays this advanced variation, Magnus attacks the centre, and now Hans only goes and sets up a connect 4, wins himself a day at the beach with the man himself, the GOAT. What a lucky guy. Now we see the knights develop into the game, and bishop d7, little bit of activation, and these are some of the main moves for white, but Hans Niemann comes prepared with this little bad boy, and watch where the bishop goes. Really unusual system. Magnus now develops, maybe looking for knight f5, and what is it, a mouse slip? He's just hyper-fianchettoed the bishop, completely missed the promised land here, or is it a deliberate system? Maybe playing against the knight f5 stuff, I don't know, it's deep stuff here. We get takes in the centre, Magnus ruining Hans Niemann's sandcastle, it's not very nice, the lifeguard has to have a word, you've got to play nice. Now we see takes back and knight g6, a really ugly move, given that the knight now has no hops, but it allows the development of the bishop. The knight enters the game and the king can get castled. Hans now plays Chewbacca's favourite move, the Wookiee one. We see rook c8, that's where they belong on open files. And now look at this. This is a man prepped with the engine. I mean, unusual manoeuvre here, not easy to find. Bishop g4. Hans is playing like a machine right now, killing Magnus Carlsen. And yes, I'm baiting the comments here. Let's maybe move on from the whole, Hans has got something in his derriere thing. That actually came from Eric Hansen, by the way, throwaway comment in one of his streams. That's where that all started. h6 from Magnus, the pawn gallops down the board and it's trying to kick the knight back. So rook e8 is actually best, preparing knight f8. But f6 is played. Very, very stinky move. Now we see takes. It opens up all the pressure. So Magnus whispers rook lift and he covers the pawn just, but he's running into some trouble here after h5. Dad is absolutely ashamed. What are you doing back here? Go and make something of yourself in the world. Look at those laser bishops raking. The knight re-enters the game. Franken knight back to life. And now the best way to play here is this slow way. Rook c1, king g2. Really squeeze the kahunas. But the pressure is just relinquished for a moment because this knight hop is played natural, but it allows Magnus to swap off that terrible pony. How do you now recapture? Not a straightforward decision. Pawn takes is played. You keep your bishops. You do give black a passer though, but importantly, you actually win something much bigger here because if black drops back the rook, natural looking move, then there's this tactic out of nowhere. It's knight takes on d5. Well done if you were able to spot that one. Pawn recaptures, and this is the point. Then you get this e6 move, queen goes, and when the dust settles, you're an exchange ahead. So we run it back. Magnus spots this stuff, and he takes on f4. Giving an exchange now. He does have some counterplay in the form of the bishops and especially the dark squared one, but he misses the correct square. Niemann now well ahead, doing really well. Rook e3 lifts, excellent attacking idea. Magnus rotates this knight, opening up his pieces. Rook c1 played and the bishop cuts back. That's the square it should have started on. The rook slides over, hits that king. Magnus develops the queen with tempo against the pawn, and after queen d2, we see rook f8 going for the pressure down the f-file, maybe supporting knight f5, and a3 looks for expansion, so Magnus shuts that one down. Rook g2 now played to cover the f-pawn, preparing to rotate that knight. King h8, nice prophylactic chess. Knight e2 played, and great move by Magnus. Pawn d4. He's looking for the play. He's stopping the knight from ever sitting on that square. The bishop could come to c6 now. Who knows, maybe knight d5 one day. And just to give you a flavour of how easy it is to go wrong here, what if you cut back to cover this? Well, then knight f5. You just gave a square. Okay, what if you go queen c2 to win a bishop? Well, then you can ignore it and go knight h4, hitting this. What if you misassess it and you think taking's good to swap the pieces? Before you know it, Magnus is running his d pawn, his bishop's alive, his rook's coming to the d file, black even stands marginally better here. This sort of thing. But no, Hans Niemann's on fire. He plays pawn to b4 before Magnus can get too comfortable. Takes his played, pawn recaptures. It's an excellent pawn sacrifice, reminiscent of the Dr. Lupo b4.
Okay, so right here, I had to make the choice to sack the pawn, because no matter what, it was just going to go bad really quick.
Now we see takes, and it's giving a queen exchange. Few of Magnus's fans enjoy it, but they don't start bleating because they know he's in a tough endgame. They normally love it when the queens leave the board. The rook is hitting the knight here, so it takes on e6, hits the rook, that slides into e4, hitting the pawn, and so f4 is played to just cover it. Plus it's supported by the knight. It's too much to cope with, so Magnus has to give up his bishops, but that light squared one is now going to be a monster around the king. You know, could even be mating ideas. The pawn now drops to the rook. This one invades, and it's just all hanging by a thread for Magnus. He plays rook e4 to go after that pawn here. Niemann outplaying him from start to finish, but we reach this critical moment and it's not easy to find the best way forward. One of the lines here that the engine shows is rook b2, with the idea that you're now hitting... Sorry about that one, my mouse just died, had to replace it midway through. As I was saying, this is one of the top engine lines. So you hit the bishop here. Let's say black then takes this pawn, saying fine, you take my bishop, but I take your bishop. Well, here's one example of how white can get a great attack. The knight saves itself, but the rooks crash through. You've kept a pawn on the board as well. The king could march in one day. This one's in a very bad position. White's winning this endgame apparently. Okay, it still needs to be converted. You know, if the pawns leave the board, I believe that should be a hypothetical draw. So we come back. This was one of the ways to go, or rook g4. Really tricky though. Niemann takes this pawn, but it's a big mistake. Look at the plummet over there of Ival Barovic, because now Magnus can check. The king goes, step into the h-file was apparently better, and now when this pawn drops here, we enter a similar kind of endgame with still some pieces on the board, but all the pawns are now gone. This is how the game proceeded here. The rooks actually leave the board. Now we're in this end game where Magnus has got 2 pawns and a piece for the rook. Should be a theoretical balance. And after the king marches in, Magnus creates the barrier with the pawn and bishop. It's attacked, and you just can't make any progress against this because everything's cementoed. You can give these lateral checks here. Oftentimes you see Magnus try and win such a position even, but he's not having any of it this game. He's just simply repeating with the king, and the game did end peacefully. Hans Niemann crushing Magnus there, but just slipped at the end, but not on the tournament. He won the whole thing on tie breaks, beating out Magnus and Hikaru. Quite incredible really. What a performance, what a blitz player he's becoming. Hope you enjoyed this one. Smash subscribe if you did, and have a look at the video on screen if you want to see some seriously epic chess between Magnus and Hans at the World Blitz in the December just gone. Cheers.